And we're back. Thank you so much for joining Engadget at CES 2019. We've got something very special for you today. We normally talk about hardware and gadgets, and that's great, but there's more going on in the world than just that. And to talk about that, we're joined by Twitter's Director of Product Management, Sarah Hyder. Sarah, how are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me here. I've been at Twitter for 9 years. This will be going into my 10th year now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a crazy and awesome journey. What originally brought me to Twitter, I was kind of just out of school, was just the mission, the idea of connecting everybody through conversation, it being the place where everything happens, where people go to see what's happening and to talk to each other. That was pretty powerful for me back then, and that's really resonated with me throughout the years, and that's why I'm still here.
And you brought up conversations, and that's something I think is kind of crucially important now. I will admit that I'm not the greatest Twitter user in the world, but I tweeted something about a certain billboard that happened to be on display on the other side of the strip, and it kind of blew up, and sifting through those replies, trying to have a meaningful conversation with a person, honestly feels really difficult sometimes.
We know that Twitter is the place for people to go for conversation, and the best conversations in the world are unfolding on Twitter. You might watch the Golden Globes on TV, but you go to Twitter to see the conversation that everyone is having, the feelings, the thoughts, the reactions, and the pulse of what's going on. And that's really something that has become even more and more apparent every year, that people use Twitter for this kind of stuff. But as some of these conversations start to get really deep, or as conversations become really popular, and people are trying to find that connection with each other, we know that the platform can sometimes be pretty tricky to use. Understanding who's responding to who, what the conversation looks like, how to even visualize it. There's a lot of reading, there's a lot of text, there's a lot of tapping around. And so one of the things that we're focused on this year is how do we make Twitter feel more conversational and make it better for those great conversations that are unfolding on the platform. So whether that's you and I talking to each other, or a lot of people talking to each other on the platform, how do we make that easier to read? How do we make it easier to understand when to jump in, or who you're even replying to when you're jumping in?
How have you sort of seen people reshape the conversations for themselves before you guys decided something should be done about this?
So many of the features that we've launched throughout our history have been because of what we've observed people actually doing on the platform. So people invented the hashtag, people invented the at mention, and we've turned those into features so that they can be accessible to everyone. And with respect to conversation, we see people struggling in certain things and using the product to work around the needs that they have. And one thing that we see everyone doing is changing their display names to say, mine says, Sarah Hyder at CES. Yours might say
CES Velasco.
Right, exactly. And we see people change their display names to describe the single that they're dropping right now because they're a music artist, or they have funny Halloween names because it's Halloween. And what they're really doing is trying to provide some context to what they're tweeting. And we've been thinking about and experimenting around features that kind of are a nod back to early chat days, and when we used to use AOL Instant Messenger and stuff. Like, what would it mean now in today's world to be able to set a status that provides context to all the tweets that I'm making for the next week?
What kind of changes have you guys been testing?
So if I'm replying to you and one of your colleagues replies to me, can we show visually through indentation the way that thread is unfolding? When a tweet ends up branching into multiple conversations, can we organize that more visually so that it makes sense to people? Instead of having to tap around on the tweets to get all of the conversation, can we bring it all into one space and make it more organized? I think in terms of focusing, we spent a lot of time in 2018 and the years prior making sure that Twitter is the best place to be when something is unfolding, whether it's an event like CES or your favorite TV show or whatever. And now we want to go deeper because we've done a lot of work in that. We have this events experience that you've probably seen where you can get all of the conversation around a specific topic or event that's unfolding without having to follow individual accounts or know which accounts to follow. We've brought that all into a centralized experience. Visually, we want to, one, increase the readability of a conversation. So visually, that involves indentation, changing the density, adding in colors or icons to make things so that they will catch your eye visually if they're important to you. Making it read more like a thread, right? More like chat. You know, when you can have long group message conversations with your friends and you don't get lost, right? How do we bring those kinds of elements into big Twitter conversations? My favorite things that we've been testing so far are being able to collapse and expand sub-branches. So you're reading a long thread and you're like, okay, this branch is interesting, but I'm not really, I can see where this is going. Let's move on to the next one very quickly. Being able to collapse that and move on to the next one has been really helpful in terms of like reading long conversations. I've also really liked, we've started playing around with highlighting when the original author of a tweet is going back and replying to everyone in the replies. And highlighting that visually with a color has been really great for scanning long replies.
How do you sort of look at building features with respect to conversations that everyone kind of gets something from?
We know that people are multidimensional and want to tweet about lots of different kinds of things. We have some ways right now of gathering those kinds of conversations, like with hashtags, for example, because you can click on a hashtag and see all the conversation around that. But
right.
I think people want more controls so that I can go to the Vampire Diaries hashtag and see all the conversation in there. But if I want to participate in it, I don't want to necessarily blast all my tech followers with that. So we are definitely looking at how can we serve this experience and make people feel more comfortable talking about the topics that they want to tweet about and get those tweets to the people who want to see them without bothering the people who don't.
But there is a side of Twitter that can be less savory sometimes. It can feel a little toxic, to be very blunt about it. How do you, as a person sort of in charge of how conversations should unfold in the future, what kind of responsibility do you feel to kind of fix that? And what do you think can be done from your perch?
Totally. So healthy conversation and the health of the conversation is actually our #1 priority. And the investments and thinking that we do around health permeate into all of our product decision making and how we think about what products we are building. Ultimately, if someone doesn't feel safe on the platform, they're not going to be involved. And so that is our #1 priority, to make sure people feel safe on the platform so that they can participate and engage and get the value out of it. In the last year, we made 70 product and policy changes around health on the platform and safety on the platform. And those kinds of things continue into our product development for this year. We have teams that are dedicated to health and safety, but all of the product teams also work with them to bring those elements into the products that we are building. So, for example, in a conversation now, it's easier to report something that you feel like is unhealthy or abusive in some way, and we've added more options. We've added more options to select from. If you think something, now you can say if you think something is fake or suspicious, you can report an account that way. All of those things fall into how we actually visually design the product, to make sure that those things are easily accessible, to make sure that things that are marked as shady or unsavory in some way are visually collapsed at the bottom instead of being at the top. Those kinds of things all come into play.
Is there a way to sort of look at that more broadly and say, hey, well, if you're a person who people tend to report a lot or people tend to block a lot, is there a way for you to be signified as that as well in the context of a conversation?
So you to be signified as someone, as
so
the author?
Say, for example, I am a huge troll
Okay.
and I push buttons and I really just get people riled up and I get blocked a lot. Are there ways for signals like that to sort of be worked into conversations too, so you might, as a reader, have a sense of whose opinion might not be fully truthful or valid?
One of the signals that we can look at is if two people are having a conversation, does it result in mutual likes, mutual follows,
Interesting.
or mutual blocks, or mutes, or reports? And we can look at the result of those things and have that affect the experience that you have on the platform.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a real pleasure.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to Engadget for more from CES 2019. We will be right back.